Welcome, my name is Marty O'Shea, your superintendent. This is another in a series of short videos to explain our middle school building project to residents so that they can make informed decisions. We have an important vote coming up on September 30th, and it is as important as the town meeting vote that was successful on September 9th. If the September 30th vote is not successful, this is the town-wide election, the project wouldn't move forward. So we want to continue to make sure that we're providing residents with the best information possible as we approach that September 30th vote. Once again, the September 30th vote is to allow for the debt exclusion, to fund the design and construction of a new consolidated middle school at the Williams site. It's a 665 student school of about 135,000 square feet. So with me today, it's maybe a new face to some members of the community, but perhaps familiar to many, is Dave Fontaine Jr. Dave Fontaine is the CEO of Fontaine Brothers, our construction management firm on the project. So thanks for joining us, Dave.
Absolutely.
We'll try to keep this brief and get some critical information out to residents. So obviously the building committee felt strongly that Fontaine Brothers was the right match for this project. I think we appreciated that. You're only 9 or 10 miles down the road from us. We appreciated your experience with school construction projects across the state, and you're familiar with this community and our expectations. But from your perspective, from Fontaine Brothers' perspectives, why do you guys feel like you're the right match for this project?
Sure. So, really honored to be here, Marty, partner on the project. Fontaine's been in business since 1933. Always locally based here in Springfield, Massachusetts. Our leadership team is local. We understand the community deep. We've been honored to have built many local schools in the area. We're currently the construction manager on East Longmeadow High School, on Agawam High School, so we have a great gauge and presence in the ongoing local market, labor and escalation, all those issues that are going on. And as you noted, we've built over 100 public schools throughout the state, so we're very well equipped and experienced working on active campuses and partnering with districts just like Longmeadow on delivering successful projects like I hope this one will be.
Fantastic. I think I saw something like 50,000 or more students have kind of walked through the halls of schools that you guys have built, so that's exciting.
Yeah, thank you. It's a big focus for us and proud of our experience in it.
Yeah. So let's dive right into it. I think part of the purpose of having you join us is to talk about the costs of the project. And so we want to continue to convey to the community that we feel like this was sort of the fiscally responsible path for us, and that this was the most cost-effective option for this community to ensure that we have a building for kids for decades to come. So just generally speaking, the decision to build new, from your perspective, can you tell us a little bit why you think like that sort of made sense and that it is the fiscally responsible, most cost-effective approach for us?
And reviewing all the documentation, the committee went through a really thorough process as dictated by the MSBA to explore. I believe in this circumstance there may have been 13 or so options that were explored. Everything from core code upgrades, right, to renovations at the two schools to ultimately the new consolidated middle school. I'll say that we work with a lot of communities across the state, and generally speaking these days, when you take into account renovation costs, when you take into account building codes and energy codes, we see that new consolidated options are a really effective way to deliver new learning environments for all students across the schools that are being contemplated. Do it in a cost-effective way and do it also in a safe and efficient way, right? So when you take a renovation of, say, this scale at today's day and age with the building codes and the requirements, and you just look at the envelope of the building, for example, right? In order to comply with the new energy code, the stretch energy code, basically, every exterior element of the building would need to be upgraded in some way. So the roofing would need to be redone. The windows would need to be redone. The exterior wall, in many cases, actually needs to be modified to add insulation on the interior or the exterior in some way to beef up the energy code. All your systems on the inside of the building, are essentially at the end of or past the point of their useful life. So everything mechanically, electrically, would need to be redone, which means ceilings would need to be removed, which means excavation for plumbing that's going to tear up your slabs. So when you look at what it takes to renovate a building That way you're really touching almost every surface of the building, and you're building what you're going to renovate it into within the confines of that old layout. Not to mention, another significant factor when you consider renovation is that, the school summer, right, is 7 or 8 weeks. Yeah. It's not a time frame that you could effectively renovate or make significant progress on renovations on a building of this vintage, right? So the schools would likely be, phased, occupied, perhaps, modular trailers involved, and the time frame for construction, would be stretched out, several years probably at each school. So there's a lot of things that we see districts, just like yours, after they do a thorough vetting of new and renovation, come to the choice that new is the most cost-effective path.
And for us, renovating 2 schools and the timeline to achieve that, knowing, how long and arduous the MSBA pipeline is, you're really talking over 10 years probably before, even if renovation were the preferred option, it really is something that would take place probably over a decade easily.
That's what we've seen for the time frame.
For sure. And so assuming we have a successful vote on September 30th and we're able to go forward with design development and get into construction, I think, again, trying to convey to residents the cost containment strategies. Certainly, I'm no expert in this, but I think most folks recognize the amount of sort of market uncertainty that exists out there, and the potential for inflation or escalation, and then even unforeseen conditions. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the strategies that Fontaine has used to ensure that the project that the costs are contained, that they're properly managed, and that we are sort of getting the bang for the buck that we hope for in this project now?
Sure. So the path that you've selected for building on this project is the construction management at risk path. It's a path that we see many of the districts in the state utilize, and it's really a partnership between the district, the architect, your owner's project manager, and us as the construction manager. So we will be working alongside the district all the way, from this stage through the end of the design, through the entire procurement and contracting process. All that information will be open book, and all those decisions will be made as a group. There will be several different estimating processes that we will do, where we will compile estimates, that are thousands of lines of detail that will encompass every building element, the quantity of that, the cost per that. We'll verify that with local subcontractors, so we're getting real-time market data. So we will be tracking, what we anticipate is the actual cost to build while the project is still being finalized design. So that allows us to ensure that the district is getting the best bang for the buck and incorporating as many features as you can within your budget, but also that if there are, cost escalation challenges going on, if there are costs driving up, we have time during the design to react to those and ensure that the project stays on budget. And during the procurement process, we'll essentially act as the agent to, get several bids for each trade, to review and vet all those bidders thoroughly, and ultimately to recommend award of the subcontractors. And as part of the estimating, process and the budgeting process, we'll start the project now with, significant contingencies that are built into the number, right? So there's contingencies specifically in there for escalation, for design and pricing, and for those unforeseen items that you mentioned. That at this stage of the project are in the neighborhood of, or a little over 14-15% of the construction costs. So the contingencies that have been carried at this stage are appropriate, perhaps even a little conservative given the market and escalation. And like we said, all those costs will be tracked, thoroughly, and any costs that are not ultimately spent by the project are returned 100% to the district, and in fact, not borrowed, because they're, kind of realized as paid.
So, and I've heard you say that it's important to remember that the entire project isn't necessarily subject to all the market uncertainty that we've seen out there, that there are parts of the project, some of the supplies and some of the materials, but there are parts of the project that are much more predictable for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take any construction project, right, the elements that go into it really are a factor of labor and materials. Right, and you might, on an average project, see that upwards of 50% of the cost is in the labor. There are certainly market factors that can drive availability of labor and associated, pricing. But on a general scale, the wage rates for, the prevailing wages in the state, the wages within the union agreements are set now, they're public, and they're actually set for several years in advance. They include, market increases and everything, but that's all factored in. So, on the labor side, those costs are going to be pretty well controlled and a lot of visibility into them. And then on the material side, right, you have some materials right now that, we're reading a lot about, and we're experiencing, changes, fluctuations in things like steel and copper. But if you look at a project this size, for example, the entire steel package on this job of, $151 million total budget is, about $7.5 million anticipated structural steel cost. Within there, again, there's labor and materials. So the structural steel itself is maybe $2.5 million. That's an element that there's a lot of volatility in, but when you look at that in the grand scheme of things, even severe impacts within there are still able to be, controlled within our contingencies.
So while there might be fluctuations in the supplies and the materials, it might represent just a small fraction of the project.
Yes, a much smaller fraction than it can be made out to be.
Yeah.
And also, I'd say that right now what we're seeing in the MSBA market, Mass School Building Authority, and across kind of the construction market generally, is that projects that are bidding right now that are a year ahead of your project, 2 years ahead, are coming in at or in fact oftentimes below budget, because the private market and some interest rate driven projects have slowed down a bit.
Yeah, there's some great market data out there that's publicly available on the MSBA website that folks are encouraged to take a look at, and it really does demonstrate that this project is sort of coming in a really predictable way based on the projects across the state, I'd say.
Yeah.
And that sort of is a good segue to my next question. While you do want to compare one project to another in terms of the cost, every project's unique.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've been really pleased with is that this project is reflective of what our kids need, what this community expects, and it very much is tied to our education plan. That was the starting point for our work with JWA, with the design team, was the educational plan, and then everything flowed from there. And so I'm really pleased that the schematic design that we have in place right now is reflective of the unique needs of Longmeadow. So from your perspective, like what makes this project unique compared to other projects that you worked on?
Sure.
Yeah.
As you said, I think the schematic design that's been done is really thorough. It's really worked within the district's plan and accounts for the items that ultimately are important to the district, right? So you look through the building design. Jones Whitsett's designed a ton of schools, have a great process for prioritizing the district's needs. When you look within the building, there's space allocated for arts and music and priorities for Longmeadow. The systems that have been designed for the building are efficient, they're cost effective, not just to build, but to maintain and to run. They're green, they're renewable. The building's proposed for geothermal, which is a great investment that we're seeing a lot of communities make. And then I think that as you get outside the building, that entire kind of scope and process has been thought through as well. There's significant investment for traffic management, both on site with a lot of room for queuing with the increased population, as well as traffic signals, kind of at Williams and off site to make sure that students are safe and that the community is taken care of. So from our perspective, it's a very thorough schematic design, which means that the elements that ultimately need to be priced and included in the project are accounted for at this stage.
Yeah, the campus itself, the off-site improvements, the building itself, it's tied to what Longmeadow needs and expects for kids here in Longmeadow. So that's been one of the things that's excited me. Just to wrap up, what excites you the most about this project? I know I'm fired up to think about all the educational possibilities, and I know that's important to Fontaine Brothers as well, but what excites you about this project?
Yeah, we love working local. Many of our staff live in Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, surrounding areas. We work all throughout the state. We actually build more schools, I believe, than anyone, but we're based right here in Springfield. We live local, so when we can be a part of a project like this, it really gets us fired up. And that that importance translates through to how we're going to approach the project, right? Like we're local, we live here, and you know the success of this project is paramount to everyone in our company and to continuing to uphold our reputation that we're very proud to have built to be the premier school builder in this area.
Excellent. So assuming a successful vote on September 30th, we look forward to continuing the partnership. Plenty of information available on our middle school project webpage if folks are interested, and of course we welcome questions, concerns, and ideas all along the way. So thank you for your attention.